she comes. Here comes the man-eater, another guy, back from, where were you, Melbourne?
I was Melbourne.
Melbourne,
yeah.
okay.
Out at the Pullman at St Kilda, just beautiful. It's across the park. Have you been there? It's that beautiful lake across the road.
Yeah.
Oh, just gorgeous.
She's totally absorbed by this, what's his name again?
Dr. Flavio. He was just a bonus for the weekend. It's not bad having a good researcher on stage. Keeps you awake.
Fancy calling men just bonuses for the weekend. Goodness me. Madonna, we talked before, and the opening statement you mentioned was boys born after or from 1970.
Yes.
Let's just go back maybe 30 if we can, 20, 30 years.
Yes.
What about them? What happens to them?
So basically, after 1970 and before 1970, what this BPA tends to be doing is lowering guys' testosterone levels.
Okay.
So they've done a huge amount of study, and they've found that pretty much men born after 1970 are releasing about half the testosterone as men born 1960s and before.
Right.
So that's really quite huge when you think about how protective testosterone is. And also you think about with men, because we see a lot of boys in, grade 10, 11, 12, they hit that chronic fatigue where a virus gets them and they can't get out of bed for 7 weeks. They don't have that oomph. And I don't know whether that happened with kids when you were at school so much. Like, I know I had the Epstein-Barr virus, the old glandular fever, but, I took a month off because that's what we were told to do. I wasn't unwell the whole time. I wasn't not getting out of bed. So, hey, and I'm 1969, so I just get in before there. I was like, all weekend, yoo-hoo!
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah.
Well, you just mentioned about when I was a kid at school, because I was born in the 50s, and just...
Yeah.
I'm not going to admit exactly when, but close enough to the 50s.
Yep.
And kids at school, testosterone, I suppose we never thought about it because we didn't know about it. But, the kids fought in the schoolyard, they fought on the football field. It was just par for the course. That's what happened. That's what you did. You just accepted it.
Yeah, and it was somewhere around that 60s, 70s, 80s where prepackaged foods really became much more normal. Mm-hmm. So instead of being that meal out once well, for us, it wasn't very often. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. So it certainly wasn't that whole takeaway thing all the time or anything. But remember, you went and got your fish and chips. It was wrapped up in newspaper. It wasn't all plasticized and, sort of...
in foam trays.
No, that's right. We're really taking in too many of these toxins. Someone else I'll be getting on the show at some stage who is a professor from Queensland, and he's been studying EDC, so endocrine disruptors, for quite a while. He gave a brilliant presentation. He was saying that the most precarious time in our lives when we're breathing in and absorbing more of it is until 2 years old. Because guess what we do? We spend all that time on the floor. Mm-hmm. So if we're spraying flies, the fly spray goes down onto the carpets, the kids are crawling on the carpet, they're picking up their foot, they're putting it in their mouth, they're picking up their teddy bear, they're whacking that in their mouth, everything ends up going in their mouths. So what they found, and here's another funny little statistic, per kilogram of body weight, when we are tiny, and I'm talking up to 2 years old, kids actually breathe up to 8 times more than adults do, the amount of oxygen going through their lungs. So once again, that makes them more susceptible to traffic pollution or sprays in the house or cleaners we're using on our, on all our benches and things. They're more susceptible to all of those things. And their body is not designed particularly well for immunity because, once again, they didn't really need this 10,000 years ago. It was about breastfeeding. It was about natural immunity coming through the breast milk. It was about building those antibodies because of that line of history going on for generations beforehand. Right. So this particular professor was amazing. Now, he is doing research, this will blow your mind, on third-hand smoke.
Right.
Have you ever heard of that? I had never heard that before.
Smoke as in cigarette smoke?
Yeah. So if you smoke your first hand, if I breathe in your smoke, that's second hand. But if that smoke drops on the table and interacts with, Glen 20 or a ant spray or a something, the combination of the chemicals there is now being researched with studies to sort of show what impact that's having in us. Isn't that bizarre?
It is. It's scary, actually.
And they're finding that it's not good. I'm sure you've heard in the last few years, and I think we've chatted about it, things like living on main roads. For people with asthma and hay fever and sinusitis and breathing problems, there's something about the traffic going back and forth that activates the pollutants and makes them smaller particles that get into our lungs and can really cause a lot of breathing problems and stuff. So, yeah, so anyway, this particular doctor, he's local, he's a local boy, so I'm sure we'll get him on one day. But yeah, he was very much into endocrine disruptors.
You mentioned also too about newspaper, the fish and chips
Yeah.
in the newspaper. I remember, because when I first started work, I was working in a butcher shop. And I think paper was banned then. We had to go. We used a thing called newsprint.
Yes.
It came from the makers of might be something like Warren's Weekly or New Idea, and it was the huge big sheets. It was printed on one side but white on the inside.
Right.
So we used that, but then that was eventually banned. You had to just use white paper.
Yeah.
And fish and chip shops weren't allowed to use newsprint because there was a concern that there were problems with the print.
Oh, I'm sure there is. I'm not saying there's not. But once again, when you get receipts these days.
Yes.
Yeah, so those receipts are actually, the plastic on them is BPA.
Mm-hmm.
So, even things like that, but you don't think of that because you're not ingesting it, you're not eating it, but nonetheless we're coming in contact with it. So how many people with, say, contact dermatitis might be having issues with these sort of things? Because there's just chemicals everywhere. It's just one of these challenges.
Do we live in a bubble?
No. Then, my next favourite, the one who I said I want to be when I grow up, Dr. Pamela Peake, she was incredible. So she was the one who talked about the fact, so these are goody mice. So she was the one who talked about the fact that doctors have always believed that if there's in our genes, say, blood pressure or a history of diabetes or a history of cancer, that we have a much huger risk. And obviously the risk is higher if it's widespread in the family. But she was talking about, once again with these mice, these agouti mice, they are designed to grow disease in their poor little bodies. So they are always fat, they're fair, they're flabby, they don't have any energy, and they often have a lot of anxiety and depression.
Poor little things.
Poor little things. This is how we've bred them. So, and once again, these little mice have been bred since like 2008, or 2007. So there's 11 years of history with these mice, and of course they don't live as long as humans, so we're talking many, many generations. So what they did, and this was her take-home message to everyone. Remember, 2 weeks ago, did we talk about methylation, the MTHFR gene? Well, she was saying the key is in methylation. So all they did with these little mice for a generation was feed them greens. Now, they are mice, so it's not like you and I having to eat lettuce every day of our life. But nonetheless, greens are high in active B vitamins. So remember we were talking about activated B vitamins. So once again, without pesticides and all sorts of things, but organic green veggies, they're high in B vitamins and they methylate the cells. So the way that she described it was, you can imagine the DNA strands that we see in pictures. They're sort of like these long coils. Well, the B vitamins give methyl donors to the genes. So what they do is go in and they switch on all the genes that should be switched on, and they switch off the genes that should be switched off. So the power of greens is amazing. So what happened to these little mice? After one generation of only feeding them greens, they were born brown. They were born brown for the first time ever. They'd always been fat, fair, flabby, and they were born thin.
Wow.
So the greens alone had the power to change their DNA so that it was actively being healthier. So the methyl donors bind to the actual outside of the DNA. This is where the epigenetics come in. We're sort of changing the DNA. And this is what she said. We're changing it with every thought we have, with every mouthful we have, with every drink we have.
So was there any discussion on the greens that they were fed, whether those greens had been sprayed with anything or they were just organic?
She didn't actually say that, so... And most of the time when I do speak to researchers, and I could send her a message and ask her that, because most of the times researchers don't have a lot of funding, so they tend not to do that sort of thing unless they're being funded by an organic, sort of fund network or something. I absolutely know what you mean.
The mice have been fed these greens, but where did the greens come from?
Yeah.
What were they?
Yeah. No, I'll have to find that out for you.
Because a lot of people will sort of say that. Well, hey, those greens may have been organically grown, no spray, whatever, then again they may have.
Yes.
So the contribution may have come from somewhere else, not just the greens.
No. The greens absolutely have lots of methyl donors in them. And I think perhaps the amount of the green outweighed the negative benefit of the pesticides, herbicides, if that was actually going on in there. And there is lots of information on the internet about the clean 15 and the dirty dozen. So if you've got a limited budget to spend on organics, go the dirty dozen, and that's easy to Google. There'll be pictures everywhere. Look up images, clean 15 or dirty dozen, and you will find what veggies and fruits have the most pesticides and which ones have the least.
We could go on forever, couldn't we?
We really could.
All right. Okay, well, now we've sort of closed the gaps on a few things today. That's good. So what we'll do, we will take another little break and we'll come back because New Leaf Therapies look after the next sponsorships, which we'll head towards that one. But before we do, just a couple of little messages and another little song on your station, Bay FM. Back with more in just a moment with Madonna Guy and Russ B.